Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine Transmission for May 5th, 2021. It is Beltane. Technically, Beltane has already passed. The sun has passed the 15-degree mark of Taurus, which marks the midpoint between the equinox and the solstice. So this is when things start to really get shaken and moving with Beltane. So let's bring it out of studio mode here. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to my subscribers, my supporters on all of my media platforms, especially to my supporters on Subscribestar. Truly, you are the lifeblood of this channel. If you're new here, welcome. It's great to have you here. And as always, I like to remind people that if you really do want to support this content and independent content creators like myself who don't have sponsorship, you can interact with the content by subscribing, by liking the video, by sharing, even by commenting. It all supports the content and it signals to the AI algorithm that this is information worth spreading to a larger audience. So thank you. I'm glad that you're here, and let's get right into it for today. So it is 5 by 5. It is the 5th of May right now, and it is Beltane. And so many interesting things transitioned or shifted since yesterday. The dogs are just going insane, so I might have to mute the microphone here if they decide that they are just can't keep it together. It's raining very hard right now, so they don't want to go outside. But this is the last day that I'll be watching them, so I will be back in my studio, not tomorrow, but Friday, just in time for the new moon transmission. That's great, to get back into home space. We're going to have a new moon on the 11th in Taurus, and it's really going to test us in a lot of ways about and give us some measure of hope and a signal that there is something to look forward to as we move forward in these really incredible times. So our moon is in Pisces. Let's just get right into the chart, because today what seems to be really popping, for me at least, is this reading. So I want to get into the intuitive reading sooner than later, but it's important that we look at some things here. So we're going to look at the chart for today. It is May 5th. The moon is in Pisces, and we talked about yesterday that when this transition happened, we were going to really start diffusing ourselves, really just letting go and surrendering ourselves on a personal and emotional level into the waters of the journey. And we're going to see that come up in the intuitive message today as part of this transmission, that it's really about flowing down that river. And it's when we have duality, it's just two shores of one river. And our job right now as lightworkers, starseeds, way showers, whatever characterization you identify with as being on this planet for this point in time, as part of this transition, it's about riding down that river. So one thing I want to show you too, it's really important to kind of base some of this information, because there's a lot of information that gets thrown around about the Schumann resonance, without people really having any clue what it actually is. So, and I talk about it a lot, and I talk about it from a physics and a chemistry standpoint, so we can actually understand what's happening in real time here with the Schumann. But it is the measurement. The Schumann resonance is a measurement of the frequency of the electromagnetic field that emanates off of the planet. Just like we have an electromagnetic field that comes off of us because our heart is an electrical pump, therefore it emits an electromagnetic field around it, just like anything else electrical. The planet has the same field around it. And just like with us, when the heart rate shifts and changes, maybe it increases, that field is impacted. And we talked about this yesterday too, but I want to talk about modulation. This is a really important concept to understand when it comes to energetics, energy medicine, DNA activations, and the Schumann resonance. And we'll get back to more of the esoteric archetypal stuff in a moment, especially with the chart. But this is really important to understand, because as we're looking at the Schumann here, we talked about this yesterday, all of these white blotches here represent, as you can see on the graph, when the frequency of the field increases. And what is frequency? It's just a number of wavelengths per cycle of time. Per second is a frequency, and it's measured in hertz. So when the Schumann resonance is at balance or at its default position of 7 to 8 hertz, when it blasts up to 90 hertz, 80 hertz, and this is we're looking at right now today. Actually, let's refresh this page so we can see if it is going up or changing at all. And you can just go right to this website, disclosurenews.it, and you can find the Schumann. Yep, there it is. So here we go. Oops. There we go. So we can see that the Schumann has been spiking. That means the frequency of the Earth's electromagnetic field has been increasing over the last 3 days. Now, this is where modulation comes into effect. And this is why it's really important that as people who identify as a starseed or a light worker or somebody that a grid worker, perhaps, any kind of energy worker, anybody that's into the energetics of the planet and the human, not just the human race, but all life and what that means, it's important to understand what's going on right now, because people throw around these terms, the Schumann resonance and DNA activation, without actually understanding what it means or how we can relate to it in a material way. So when this happens, when the Schumann spikes like this and the frequency goes up, that means there's more energy in the electromagnetic field. That's all it means. When you have more wavelengths per second, right, that means there's more energy in a certain time frame, which is a second. That's what we measure frequency in, is in hertz per second, cycles per second. So when the electromagnetic field of the planet increases in frequency and in energy, then we know that the planet itself is, the heartbeat of the planet is in fact changing or increasing, or something is happening in which to increase this field. Now, sometimes it happens with solar weather, right? When we are being hit with plasma, coronal mass ejection, solar wind, sometimes this will the resonance of the Schumann will spike and be kind of a buffer for this. Now, that's not always the case. There is a strong correlation, but I've noticed that it's not all the time. Now, there is a correlation as well when there are tectonic movements, when there are tsunamis and earthquakes and under the surface movement, that also does, make an impact on the Schumann, because again, when there's shifting and changing energetically and even physically within the planet, of course, the heartbeat is going to change and the electromagnetic frequency is going to change. Now, what does this have to do with us? And what does this have to do with modulation or DNA activation? Well, we do know on a basic level that exposure to high intensity electromagnetic radiation causes mutation and it causes change in the DNA and the genetic code, and genetic structure. We know that scientifically, as our science tells us now through the scientific method. So we know that. So when the electromagnetic frequency goes up on the planet, and as a living organism has already made this transition to the fifth dimension, right? When these spikes happen, when we can allow ourselves as a direct, descendant of the planet, a direct connection, and this is where the Pleiadian aspect comes in very strongly, and this is where Venus is, the great mother, right? The goddess of love and what we are sensitive to, our material reality. She is in the Pleiadian territory now, in her home sign. And so when we connect directly and energetically to the planet, these spikes in the Schumann act as a modulator. And what is that? Now, there's a couple different definitions of modulation, but the one that I'm going to share with you has to do with, you have a signal, right? Which is the Schumann resonance is a signal, right? It's electromagnetic frequency. It's a signal. Modulation is when you add another frequency or signal in order to input information, right? And so the Schumann when it spikes to higher frequencies, it is modulating. It is adding something to our field, our electromagnetic field, our frequency around our own bodies. And if you've noticed the animals lately, they have been acting really bizarre. I don't know if you've noticed, but I certainly notice when this happens. So what's happening is when the Schumann spikes like this, you can think about it as a modulation, which is giving a signal. It's inputting a new signal into our field, right? Our field, and modulating it, giving us information, inputting information into the other signal, and influences us. And as we allow ourselves to connect very directly to the heartbeat and the rhythm of the planet, she does modulate our own energetic and electromagnetic frequency, which activates our DNA, right? This is the modulation, adding and introducing new information that then activates our DNA and either heals it, upgrades it, whatever is really necessary. And if you subscribe to the idea that we actually are meant to have way more strands of DNA than the two, then you can see how this would be upgrading us on many levels. So I want to talk about that and bring that to people's attention, because I see it all the time on social media when people talk about it and they still don't know what it is, and people still don't know how to explain it. So I'm explaining it based on my very limited education in astrophysics and chemistry. So, and biology as well. But, just a basic understanding of physics and chemistry will give you the tools to understand how these aspects work with us energetically. So it's all about energy, frequency, and vibration. That came from Tesla. And this electromagnetic field, now the current science, as far as I understand it, is saying that the electromagnetic field is coming from the core of the earth, where we have an iron type of core, which is changing, by the way, and has already shifted into a diamond core. It is, which can hold, again, a lot more heat and can hold a lot more energy. That's what a diamond can do. And it's totally made out of carbon. A diamond is just tightly packed carbon atoms, so still completely organic, unlike iron, which is its own element. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's enough of that for today. Just to give you an idea, when you track the Schumann and people talk about it, then you know exactly what's happening. And so when you are working directly, the core of the planet, that's what I wanted to say. That it's been my personal interaction with this is that it is a lattice, a network of vessels right under the surface, under the crust, where this electromagnetic field is really emanating from, rather than the core necessarily. I can't speak to that scientifically. This is just my own intuition and my own experience. But I will say that Nikola Tesla, when he was doing his work in Colorado Springs, he was plugging straight up light bulbs into the ground and harnessing energy, static electricity right from the crust of the earth, and realizing that all the power we need is actually very much accessible at very close range. And so if you think about it that way, if there's enough electricity coming just from the crust of the earth to light bulbs all over the place, then it stands to reason that perhaps there is something else happening that is emitting that electromagnetic field, and it's much more on the surface than the core. So anyway, there's our chemistry physics lesson about the Schumann, and to show you that we are getting activated and upgraded right now, and the planet herself is modulating that experience for us because she is our mother, right? This is what a mother does. This is what that Cancer archetype does, and this is where Mars is right now. Mars is in Cancer, and Mars is also able to get maybe this upgrade by being in Cancer and allowing that action-oriented divine masculine energy of the warrior to be also influenced by the nurturing, by the containment, by the protection of the bonds, the bonds of love of a family, of a nation, of a tribal identity, who you belong to and who you are loyal to. So again, This is just give you an idea of like an actual baseline in physical reality as we know it, what the Schumann does. And it's very, very active. And so we know that something big is about to drop. And of course, 5 by 5, if you know what I mean, then you know what I mean. And if you don't, then you don't. So, and then, of course, Beltane. Of course, Beltane, right? The splitting of the shell of the seed cracks open and the new life is emerging. So now we can look at the chart as I had promised and look at what's going on. So here we do have our moon in Pisces and our moon is in Pisces. The sun has just passed the Beltane point not that long ago. It's at 15 degrees, 16 minutes. All right. And it's going, tomorrow we're going to be looking at the moon meeting Neptune. Tomorrow we're going to see Venus in a trine to a retrograde Pluto on fixed star Algol. Yeah, it's going to be, and the North Node in a sextile directly to Chiron. So just be prepared that as we pass this day, we are really going to lose that which needs to be lost with Venus. And right now we are, like I said, the planet is modulating this experience. Now, the moon in Pisces is making it really the boundaries very, very loose and watery. And if we are in the chute of the stream of water, right, the flow of it rather than resisting it, we're going to be able to ride this wave out a lot more gracefully than if we are trying to resist it. And there's a lot of disappointment in a mental and an intellectual way, some very painful and deep realizations that are going to be coming into this moment today that I think are going to be much more realized by tomorrow when we have these major transits with Venus in a trine to retrograde Pluto and then the North Node in a sextile to Chiron, right? Chiron that has been really causing us to struggle with allowing ourselves to have some sort of centralizing force or centralizing power in order to have a sense of ego and a sense of self, right? It's really easy to get pulled, and we're getting pulled in one direction or another consistently. We're being triggered consistently to be on one side or the other. And the Orion star seeds, this is where they really come into focus, especially as Mercury now is going to be transiting its home sign of Gemini. Venus is not far behind. In fact, Venus is going to move into Gemini as well before this next new moon. So the ability to stay in the flow and let the apex of this be where our emotions lie rather than on either side of this flow of water, right? Whatever this waterway is for us, our emotional flow. And we want this to be the middle because what's happening is that sense of self that the seed represents is in fact going away. And this is going to just trigger Chiron so much because we already are struggling with a sense of identity and a healthy sense of self. A healthy sense of self is essential to the growth of the rest of the process, right? If Aries and the first house is not developed in a healthy way, everything else is built off of that very basic foundation. And when that seed falls away, that seed point falls away, if we haven't even allowed that to be a healthy representation of all of our potential, then we really are going to struggle when it starts growing. So, and that's where, we're going to see some issues, I think, ultimately. So the North Node, like I said, is sextile to Chiron tomorrow. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because the really strong transits are happening tomorrow, and then the moon meets Neptune, and it's going to be conscious ideals, unconscious desires. We're going to have a direct connection to those things, and we're going to surrender a part of ourselves to that. And it really is up to us if we see it for what it is and we're conscious of what we're creating, or if we're being manipulated and exploited in some ways in order to manifest something unconscious. And this is where the intuitive message is going to come in very strongly for us today to show us the way to the way to ride this out as we are facing some potentially as a collective facing some very sobering realizations and having to face the futility of our own mind and intellectual work. So the moon, of course, is going to square the nodes. It's going to be in a trine to Mars in Cancer today. So there's some support here, certainly with where the moon is, but it's also going to provide some tension with Mercury now moving further into its own home territory, where there's a part of us that kind of wants to hide, right? We want to protect ourselves, and that's part of the Pisces archetype. 2 degrees Pisces, you want to pull back and hide, because ultimately, when you are inseparable from the rest of society on an emotional and energetic level, and spiritually, there is a tendency to want to find a place to hide, because then you leave yourself open. And Mercury is really challenging us in the 2nd degree of Gemini to also stay open to our innocence, and that if we want to discover things, if we want to explore the unconscious and our psyche and really get to the heart of what is possible for humanity, we do have to allow ourselves some innocence and openness. So that right there, I mean, there's going to be that square already. That's already happened overnight. And so the moon is then going to trine Mars at the same time that it's opposite asteroid Vesta in Virgo. There's going to be a strong call to step forward and participate, and in some ways be a mouthpiece for it, to sound the call, to summons people, right? This is going to be something that's coming within us, and we're not going to really see it very strongly because the moon is now waning in her cycle. We're in the last lunar quarter now, so we may feel it. It might be a stirring within the darker places within us that we not necessarily conscious of, but it is going to trine Mars, which is at a position that's kind of weird for Mars, where it's really at a beginning of a learning process and imitating those who represent what it is we want to participate in, who we want to be. The character really develops in the Cancer and the Cancer area and the 4th house. So Mars here is really coming to learn about himself, because he is sheltered and protected by the familial bonds that Cancer represents. So while the moon is in opposition to Vesta, which is at Alpha Draconis right now, it's certainly finding some support with Mars that is like, well, it's not so much fake it till you make it, but search out those in your immediate environment who represent what it is you want to become. And you can allow that part of yourself, that divine masculine warrior energy, to engage with that. And the moon will find support here as we are all feeling stirred to come forward, or to at least sound the call for where we are all going. Now, Vesta is really training us right now, and has been, because she just went direct in this. I mean, she's been sitting on Alpha Draconis now for weeks, retrograde and now direct. And so she's really getting us into shape. She's whipping us into shape. She's showing us where we need to discipline ourselves and the potential for initiation, but it's still kind of encased in like a structure, a cultural structure, right? A cultural standard of how we do this. And so that the opposition, right? We always find our fulcrum. That's where we find our balance point with the tension of these oppositions. So you want to take the steps that is within a framework that is culturally known and acceptable, but also at the same time, you want to allow this the trumpet of Gabriel, essentially, if you want to think about it that way, to stir you to express that in some way, and even just to feel it within you. We can all feel the call, and we may not, and it's important that we maybe look to those who represent where we want to go to really get some traction with this opposition with Vesta. So and then the moon is going to come around and sextile. So that happens So there's the moon at 8 degrees, and then it's going to come around into a sextile at 60-degree angle with Uranus today. And that is an investment opportunity. It's harmonious, but we need to participate in some way. And we are traveling a very narrow path. Again, we're going down this waterway, a river, a stream, however you want to do it. We're moving through the midpoint of what are these opposite shores, right? That are both flanking this emotional and spiritual journey that we're all taking. And we are traveling a narrow path. And remember where Uranus is, cultivating the garden of our own consciousness, putting our energy into making sure the ground is fertilized, make sure we're watering whatever is growing and blooming, taking care of it. This is the pathway of our collective illumination. And the moon is in a degree in Pisces that is making that very palpable within us, that we are traveling a narrow path. We cannot get pulled into one side or the other, as tempting as it is. And that's been happening all year. And like I said yesterday, I really caution people to be very aware of any kind of narrative, even if it seems like it is here for our best interest and to protect us. If it is splitting us intentionally, it's suspect, in my opinion. And my own guidance too is giving this to me. We do not want to get engaged with necessarily. I mean, there are a few things, I really hesitate to say this. There are a few things that I think that humanity needs to take a hard line on, but when they do, then you take the hard line. But in the meantime, the spiritual path is the middle path. This is the Buddhist pathway, the middle way. And so the moon, we will feel that we are traveling a very narrow path, and we can invest this position of Uranus, this outward, this future-oriented and revolutionary energy that Uranus represents, that is about the humanitarian cause, right, is able to give us some way to invest into this personal and very spiritual journey that we're all taking right now. And of course, the moon at the same time, right after, is then going to square the nodes at the same, right after that. And that is going to certainly initiate us. We're going to be feeling initiated while the nodes are pulling us in different directions of our soul's evolution, what we're here to learn, how to completely liquidate the past and move towards our future. While that opposition that is always happening with the nodal axis of the moon herself is going to be in this initiation process. And it's going to cause a lot of tension here with where this nodal axis is pulling us towards and away, karmically, which is what the nodal axis of the moon represents in the chart. So, of course, Mars then is going to sextile Vesta. Again, if we want to, we're starting on this pathway of initiation of ourselves, of that part of ourselves that we bring to service of the community, right? The Virgo archetype. Mars is in a sextile. Again, we find the exemplars. We find those within our family, within our community, within those familial bonds, our Sangha, our spiritual community, whoever it is, whatever it is. We find those in that community that allow us to practice, allow us to have a representation of where we want to go. And this, again, will absolutely, we can invest this energy into Vesta. And like I said, the trine to the moon is where we're going to get traction here on this whole process, instead of Mars just like, just out the gate doing the Mars thing. It is where the character really develops, is in the Cancer archetype. And so Mars right now is in this position to really actually get that divine masculine warrior energy. Like the healthy masculinity is where it is developing right now. So, and the priestesses in, Vesta is in Virgo. She's in the sign of her priestesses right now. So, looking towards them. What do? They stepped away from all of the responsibilities of life. They were not owned by any other responsibility other than themselves and to the spiritual the spiritual community. That's what the priestesses were there to do. So again, let them be the exemplars for where Mars is, to show that divine masculine, that warrior energy, how to really be of the highest order. Wow. So much going on today. So I want to look at, and tomorrow, like I said, tomorrow we can just look real quick, just so we know, right? Tomorrow, here is Venus at fixed star Algol, who's going to come into a trine with a retrograde Pluto, right? The head of Medusa. This is where the modulation really is important, because this trine, trines are not necessarily benefic. They just are structurally sound. That just means they don't have to investigate or invest any energy, or there's no tension here. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to feel it in a powerful way. We will. Absolutely. This trine is going to be so powerful tomorrow. And on top of that, with the right at 11 degrees, the Chiron and the North Node in a sextile, Chiron and the South Node in a trine, right? This is going to be very intense tomorrow. And then the Moon meeting Neptune right after that happens. I mean, we are going to give of ourselves completely and utterly to some sort of substantiation on a very spiritual level. And how we go through the next day or so is going to determine what that's going to look like for all of us, really. Okay, so now that we've gone through the chart today, let's go into the reading, because this is just, man, it's just so good. It's just so good. Okay, here we go, my friends. Again, the lighting is not great, but here we are, and I have everything queued up so that we can look at it one piece at a time. So we have some swords here as our causal factor coming into the moment. The Three of Swords. Nobody likes this card. But the thing about the Three of Swords is that it is also structurally sound. The three is synthesis and harmony. So it is a painful realization. And to have it reversed, it's going to be hard. So it's either within us to a certain extent, but I honestly, looking at this whole reading, it's going to be a deep and painful realization that we don't want to really accept collectively. This is a collective type of reading here. Not everybody is going to resonate with this, and not everybody is going to feel it to the extent that the collective is going to feel it. And you come into this moment of futility, right? The Seven of Swords. There's a lot of sevens also in this reading, as we're going to see today, that there is a sense of the fall from grace and that wild card that allows for divine intervention. Two cards came out, the Seven of Roses. There's the Journey, the Over Water, and the Queen of Roses, which is really, we talked about the Queen of Cups yesterday, and now she is kind of upright in this energetic root position where we have realized maybe that we can ground ourselves a little bit and not be a total transformer or be a total, in fantasy land about it. We can root ourselves energetically into this, we can be this process. We can call in this guidance of the Queen of Roses to really root us on this emotional journey. Oh, wow. Now the top here, this is what says to me that our focus and awareness is going to be on, we're going to really need our discernment. I haven't seen the shark in a long time. And so with the wishes fulfilled being reversed and the shark, just keep in mind, it's going to look like that things are being taken away, that we are defining ourselves by lack. It's going to be very, and the Three of Forces, the bird's nest, also reversed. It's going to look like our conscious attention and focus is going to be on what isn't, what we're losing. There's going to be this contraction to a certain extent. The shark is here to remind us to use our discernment and our instinct, our gut, to know what the truth of the situation is. Okay, so let's look at all of this one piece at a time. All right, Three of Swords. Well, it is reversed. So the sorrow, and Saturn right here, Saturn in Libra. Saturn is actually, Libra is very Saturnian. Venus, obviously, but also very Saturnian. And there's a melancholy that goes along with Saturn, and depression, as anybody with those kinds of Saturn aspects in their chart probably know, that Saturn is incredibly melancholic and depressing, all right? Because it's the boundary. This is why, the 27 Club with certain people not, either dying, committing suicide that are famous, it's their Saturn return, right? Your first Saturn return is anywhere from 27 to 32, right? It's the place where Saturn was at your birth time. This is like you either grow up or you don't. And if you let the depression take you over, this is usually what happens. And people who overdose are consuming their substances to the point where it does destroy them. So even if it's not intentional, it's the self-medication and the addiction that really is masking a lot of ultimately this depression and melancholy. Anyway, so coming into the moment, this causal reality of Three of Swords reversed, right? The sorrow is substantial already, and then it's a painful realization, losing a beautiful but false illusion. So when it's so upright, it's already terrible and painful, right? The sorrow, because we do have synthesis of the mental concept, which the swords are so hard to deal with because they're sharp. They're double-edged and sharp, there's no getting around that when it comes to the mind, and like I said, Saturn is a lot of the boundary, and the responsibility that we can't get around. So melancholy and Saturn, when realizing the truth. Okay, this is what the sorrow represents. And if you remember in the Rider-Waite deck, it's a heart pierced with the swords. So it's not really too hard to wrap your head around. So detection of deceit and treachery and lying. This is also part of this when we come to a painful and sobering realization. Excuse me. When it's reversed, all of this, same thing, but not really accepting it very well. It also can be an internalized experience. And so that's something to keep in mind too, that feeling this sorrow and realization about ourselves, about something that we are engaged with. So it can be taken in a lot of ways. But what I will say is that it seems to be that the painful realization is going to be, and the melancholy, the truth, right? Letting go of the false illusion is going to be so painful. But what it is going to lead to in this moment here, this causal reality, is the futility of all of this. So moon in Aquarius, all right? There's already an aloofness here with the moon in Aquarius, a certain level of emotional detachment because you see and feel the bigger picture, right? And so Aquarius is the mind. It is that genius mind that makes all of the connections, and it has to do with the connections of all of humanity, all of life, and the energy that is pervasive in all of life. It is beyond. We have Capricorn that represents the material institutions, the matrix of reality. Aquarius is that it's not physical or material, but it's very much measurable and palpable energy that moves through the collective. This is why it is futuristic and outside of the box, because it is something that we feel and we know, but it's not something that is material necessarily. So Aquarius too, in the futility of it. Look at these, all of these swords coming at this central location of a sword, right? No matter what. And they're not even really touching the sword. They're just barely touching it. And you can kind of see that there are little notches out of this sword where these other swords are pointing at it. But the reality is that you can't escape the hands of fate. And fate is nothing more than a cause and effect relationship. Fate is, there are past actions, there are current actions that determine future actions. Okay? So that is all that fate really is. And we are, in fact, in a free will universe, and we set these cause and effect relationship in motion every choice we make. So the futility here is that no matter what trickery, cheating, intentional confusion that comes about, these swords coming at it all from all directions, the reality is it's going to unmask the illusion and disguise. So you can see that there's some continuity already with the Three of Swords coming into the Seven of Swords. There is nothing that can stop it. And the unmasking of illusions, the disguises that cover the truth, it's all going to be revealed and accepted. That's the thing about the Seven of Swords. You have to just kind of accept it when it gets to this point. The Three of Swords is just the sorrow and the depression and the melancholy, the disappointment and sadness that we realize when we have to be real and realize the truth. Because the swords are about the truth. There's nothing that stops truth. Facts are facts. And so when we get to this present moment here of the futility, it doesn't matter what it gets thrown at. It's going to unmask the illusions and the disguises. And maybe part of the reason here, this causal reality of just like the disappointment facing this futility is a very potent energy for today. Now, when we got the Seven of Roses, this has been coming up a lot. And so it's a very impactful energy too. The emotional journey, going on a journey over the waters, right? The waters of the ocean or the sea, which is the collective unconscious, sailing over and making a transition somewhere, and it's very emotional. So you're packing up your stuff, you're getting on the tender boat, and they're going to take you out to the ship that's going to take you out to sea, and you can see the setting sun out there, right? So if we are emotionally rooted in this place that we are going on this journey, right? We're not on one shore, we're not on the other shore, we are going down the waterway that represents this emotional spiritual journey. We need to root ourselves into this today. And if we do, then, you'll see. We'll see where we go. And we have the Queen of Roses that came out along with it. Doesn't often happen, but sometimes it does. And when it does, it's pretty obvious. So we have the Queen of Roses as a guiding point. This is this tenderness, this passion, this love that we can embody as a transformer, as a reflector, right? Remember, the Queen of Cups was reversed before, which is just like being totally open to every influence possible, and not being able to ground ourselves at all, and to shift into fantasy and think that and dream world and not be based in reality at all. So now we have the Queen of Roses upright. She is focusing on her attention on this one rose petal or this one rose blossom, giving all of her love. She's surrounded by them, but she's giving all of her love, her attention, her focus on this one piece, which you could look as your own heart, right? Really. And the Queen of Roses is, the emotional aspect. And so we also bring in this ability to be tender to ourselves and to the people around us as we go on this journey, and we root ourselves. And this is she really reminds me right now of Venus, even though she's in Taurus, which is a very earth sign. Obviously, it's her home territory. And she's at fixed star Algol, which is Medusa's head. And so it's kind of like this part of ourselves that we know we need to let go of and to go on this journey emotionally. We can honor that and love that too. This is part of the shadow integration work, is not acting out of our shadow unconsciously and not letting it run the show either, but just looking at it, honoring it, honoring that part of ourselves, loving it as much as every other part of ourselves, and realizing that we have to attend to ourselves emotionally as we go on this journey and be this person as well. We can all embody this. And again, remember Mars in Cancer, right? This queen in some ways is like holding that part of ourselves that Mars is, that warrior part of ourselves, and nurturing it and loving it and giving she's giving her focus to as a mother energy. And you can look at Gaia like this as well. Especially with the Schumann resonance, go back to what we talked about earlier at the beginning, the Schumann resonance. So let's see here. That's the energetic root, this journey, this emotional journey. And it's very, very healing, as we will see. It's a healing journey. Now, what we're going to see and where our attention is going to be focused, again, is this Five of Keys reversed, these wishes fulfilled. I mean, everything is going to be turned upside down. It's going to seem like our wishes are completely unfulfilled. We're losing things, not gaining them. And we are going into a state of total lack. This is where the collective attention is going to be through this process today with Beltane. And again, remember, we talked about when that seed cracks open, if you do not acknowledge that was just a temporary position, then when that happens, that's going to feel like the Five of Keys being reversed, like we're losing everything. Okay, so keep that in mind, and the futility and the sorrow and the sadness, but having this root in this very deep healing process, and the journey that represents the healing process is really going to be how we get through this collectively, and how maybe you can help other people if you are seeing this as clearly as I am and realizing it. So where this is going is our Hermit card, right? The Hermit, number 9. So there's a culmination point here of the Hermit. We also are talking about going into the underworld of ourself, right? Saturn, the Hermit is Virgo, right? That Virgo time, that 6th house. This is the works and the responsibilities and the actions, the duties, all of the routines, all of the actual material things that we do on a regular basis to become the best version of ourselves. And sometimes this requires retirement from the outside world and introversion so we can listen to our inner voice. Right? This is important in terms of our gut check. And sometimes we have to drown out the noise, or not even drown it out, although with all this water energy, maybe that is what's going to happen. But going on the journey too, I mean, if you've ever done the float, you've gone out in your kayak or whatever, when you're going downstream, you know, it can be very peaceful and quiet, and you're not engaged with what's happening on the land on either side. You're just floating down. And so part of that too is, you know, the introversion and allowing ourselves to listen to the inner voice, self-reflection, self-realization. You know, behind the Hermit is the High Priestess. We cannot get into that mode of the High Priestess, which is the moon, without actually, you know, stepping back and away from all of the social aspects in order to listen to ourselves. And we gain inner light, we gain maturity, and we gain wisdom. So this is what to expect from all of this energy today, is that there will be a pullback and an introversion, so we can really listen to our gut and really listen to our inner voice. And for as much as this also is Virgo, it's represented by Saturn in Aquarius, which is where Saturn is right now, the search for wisdom. That's really what it's representing. So expect here to have collectively that there's going to be a pullback so that we can really listen to ourselves, our own gut. I don't know why my nose itches so much when I make these videos. I'm sorry, that's a total non sequitur, but it's so distracting, and I don't understand why that happens. It's only now. It won't be that way throughout the whole day, except now. Anyway, so let's look at some guidance here. So when it comes to the emotional journey of healing, having the Queen of Roses, the caught in the ruins, number 1, 16 is 7. So we have another 7. So we have the futility, we have the caught in the ruins, right? You can see very clearly from this card that it's a self-imposed prison. It may have been built by someone else, but it's ancient and it's old, and we may have been put there, but now we can leave at any point that we want. So that's something to consider as part of this healing journey, that is up to us to look up and climb out as part of our healing journey. Also, along with that, the seagull. Now is the time for deep emotional healing. We have to take ourselves out of our own prison. And keep in mind that the seagull flies above it, right? Flies above the ocean. Sometimes it's going in order to get its meal, right? It's able to dip into the collective unconscious, into the waters of our deep emotions, right? But it's also able to come back out and have that perspective as well. You can't separate them. Seagulls really do want to live near the water. They will come inland when they need food, but for the most part, they are hovering and flying above. And so this gives us a little bit of, this gives us some power and some control or some empowerment over the process. You don't want to indulge all of these, right? Indulging would be like, oh, I'm caught in the prison and woe is me, right? And not realizing it. Being an empowered and conscious co-creator is saying, okay, I'm going to actively engage with this healing process because this is part of the inner journey that we all need to be taking right now so that we can handle what is in our conscious attention and awareness, which is what's happening up here. So speaking of which, so the shark, trust your instincts to discern the truth of the situation. Boy, this came out a lot a year ago, a lot. Like almost every reading, the shark was coming out. And naive little old me, I thought like people would really get that. But the reality is that we all have to come to this on our own terms, and it doesn't matter what people tell you. You have to come to recognize it on your own. So for as much as we are collectively going to be seeing total, turnover of what we think we want and desire and our wishes being fulfilled, it's really important that we trust our instincts to discern the truth of the situation, that we do not get pulled into the drama of this situation. And along with that, the three of forces, is the bird's nest, right? And we've talked about this before, because the bird it's about expansion and creating something that is going to hold new life. Now, when it is reversed like this really does suggest that it's much more of a contraction. The birds have left the nest, and there is going to be a time where creating something new is going to be this energy will be available to us. But right this moment, right now, it seems to me that there's again the contraction, right? There is an emptying of the nest, giving us an opportunity to maybe go on the journey, right? When you don't have dependence or responsibilities and you're not the mother bird, for instance, and you can see, look, there's this little butterfly here. So there is a metamorphosis that this represents, but at the same time, being reversed is saying, this process is now finished to a certain extent, and before you can build a new nest and bring new life, maybe it's time to go on the journey, right? This is, empty nest syndrome. This is what people will do, apparently, is, travel. I can't tell you how many people I saw when I was traveling last year in Europe. I was there for 2 months traveling all over Western and Central Europe. And the people we would meet, a lot of them were older and retired, and the dog is like chewing on my, he's so insistent. I have nothing for you, dog. I have nothing to give you. So get down. Get down. Oh, he's getting mouthy. I can't tell you how many people I talked to that were retired and they're older, and they said, I really wish I would have done this when I was younger, but they have kids and responsibilities and, their 9-to-5 job and their house and all that stuff. And so this is, if you feel like things are being taken away from you in this situation, see it for the potential benefits here of this healing journey, because you can't really focus on yourself nor go on a journey either spiritually or physically even if you are responsible for managing and maintaining some sort of container, right? That is for new life to grow. And there is new life to grow, right? But right now we're at Beltane, which is the seed breaking open and dissolving back into the soil. So just keep that in mind, and it'll seem like you're losing, right? And that's why the shark is so important right now, because you have to really trust your gut. And oh my God, dog, stop it right now. Oh, what did you eat? Okay, anyway. It's clear that this transmission needs to end and that these dogs need my attention. So I'm going to end it there. I think I gotten the point across, guys. So have a great Beltane. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here as part of this transmission. And thank you for being here. If you are interested in a reading, energy work, you want to, reach out on social media, you can find everything you need in the description box below. And you can connect to me and Catalyst Energies in a lot of different ways. So thank you for being here. Like I said, have a great Beltane. Reach out if you need support, and we will be connecting again tomorrow for the daily medicine transmission. And soon we're going to have a new moon on the 11th, and that's going to be a new moon in Taurus. And so interesting times ahead. Okay, guys, take care of yourselves. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow.